There we go, right on time. So that allows colleagues who can't make it here today to watch this back. So this is actually a really interesting point in our field's history, actually, with the publication of the drug strategy last Monday. Peter and I have always commented that the last kind of 2 years have felt like a relentless focus on first the Black Review and then the drug strategy. And now that it's published and the funding that we've all campaigned for has actually been announced, we kind of won't know what to do with ourselves. I'm sure we'll find stuff to keep us busy, but it does feel like the turning of a page. And I'm fairly optimistic, actually. There's certainly lots of detailed stuff to get into and to discuss. But really, the fact that the drug strategy's taken on the vast majority, if not all, of Dame Carroll's recommendations, and there is a pretty robust protected settlement alongside the policy recommendations in the strategy, means I think we're at an important point in our field's development, and there really is a chance to reboot and kind of renew the drug and alcohol treatment system in this country. So that's enough from me. We've got a really, really exciting panel here today for your webinar. And the format we're going to use is our 5 brilliant speakers are each going to have 5 minutes each. There's no PowerPoint, there's no long presentations, there's nothing like that. They're going to have 5 minutes to set out their stalls. I'm going to prime them with some 3 very short questions just to sort of galvanize a response from them, but I'm sure they'll do their own thing. We'll have those 5. That will take us to 4 o'clock, and then we will get into some Q&A. So really the emphasis today is on the question and answers. Please keep them coming in. I will curate them and field them to our panel today. So keep them flowing. And yeah, I really look forward to the webinar today. So thank you very much for attending. Okay, excellent. Let's turn to the first of our panelists. So April Wareham is going to speak first, and April and all the others, the 3 questions I've got for you really, although I'm sure you'll speak broadly, are what's brought you here today to the webinar? Not literally, that was an invite from Collective Voice, and thank you for coming. But I mean more, why is this an important thing for you in your life? Second question, what's one vision of the future you've seen in the system today which is giving you hope? What's something positive that you're pointing to and thinking, yes, we've got to do more of that. That's a good thing. And correspondingly, what's one thing in the system which you think we can do a lot better at? So those are my 3 kind of primer questions. April, over to you for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. My name's April, and in some ways who I am isn't really very important. I'm somebody with lived experience. My role these days is to try and bring the voice of lived experience from people who don't often get a voice into policy and decision making. And now I'm going to ignore what Oliver asked me to do and do what I want to do. So people have an individual experience of something, a life experience or an experience of care, something that happens, and that forms the basis of their lived experience. Each experience is unique and each experience is valid. In general, we see people who either have a very, very good experience or a very, very bad experience of care. They then use this as a motivation to either ensure that other people can have the same good stuff they did, or make sure nobody else ever gets that bad stuff again. Both are really powerful motivators. There's loads of ways to use lived experience. Broadly, I'm going to split it into 2 main ways. The 2 main ways are you can use your lived experience to deliver service or to change strategy. Okay. And each of these can take as many forms as there are people. All the ways are equally valid and they are equally valuable. There's no value judgment in any of this. Everyone that's doing this wants to improve things for people. That's why we're here. One way is not better than another. They're just different. The first and maybe the most visible way is that people use their lived experiences to identify a gap in service provision and to fill it. This could take the form of providing a weekend drop-in, recovery support, peer-led naloxone, peer-led needle exchange, hepatitis C support, education, information, advocacy, support for individuals to access existing services like hospitals or housing. This great thing to do, makes a real difference to people and communities every day. The second way to influence, to use your lived experience to influence, is to become more involved in policy, research, commissioning, strategy. It's very different to service delivery, but it's equally important and valuable. Slightly different skill set. Sometimes it's much harder to describe to somebody what you're doing as well. It's much harder to say, look, I did that. Somebody who wishes to make a strategic difference may choose to work entirely in their local area, looking at service design, commissioning, service monitoring. It's likely that they could understand everything that was going on. They could know the individual people, the commissioners, the service managers, the police, the housing, probation, by name. And it's possible sometimes to get really tangible results in a relatively short period of time, a year or two. And it's really important with lived experience to have an opportunity to get involved and help shape services in their local areas. This can help to provide a good service for everybody in that area. Somebody who wants to make a strategic difference might choose to work within a particular service provider. Might be a drug treatment provider, a housing provider, health service, any of those things. They may have the opportunity to be involved with changing the organisation's policy, something like changing supervised consumption of methadone, or helping to shape a recruitment policy, or to define a new job role. They might be asked to sit on a board or take part in staff interviews. It's a really important thing to do, and sometimes it can eventually, a bit slower, help to implement a change that impacts loads of people. Every person who uses that service in every area that service exists in. People might choose to become involved in research, helping to ensure that research answers the questions that are important to the people that it's about, that the questions are appropriate and the research is ethical, and that the results of the research are actually used to make a difference to people. A bit more of a long-term project, this one, getting your funding and your ethical approval and your results, and then getting it published takes ages. Good piece of research can change the whole way a service is delivered, to make a new intervention available to everybody, to loads of people. And finally, you might choose to get involved with writing guidance or policy or strategy at a national level. It's likely that that will involve loads of meetings, a phenomenal amount of reading, and a lot of time. Sometimes it feels like nothing will ever change, but it's important that people with lived experience have the opportunity to be involved, because otherwise the guidance or the strategy or the policy may not work as well as it could, or even at all. And once it's written, it can take forever to change. It's important because it can affect everyone who needs that particular service for the foreseeable future. Because when someone in a local area wants to do something, they want to set up a peer-led needle exchange, or they want to help an individual get the best treatment for them, the policy and the guidance can be used in a very practical way to support people. And now that was a very quick look at some different things that people can use their lived experience to achieve. And there's lots of different ways to achieve each of these outcomes. None of them is better than the other. They're all important. They're all valuable. They're just different. And until the drug treatment field can accept that they are different and give equal value to all of those functions, we're not actually getting the full benefit of lived experience in drug treatment. Okay, that's me.
Great. I didn't want to jump in too early. Thank you, April. Brilliant and succinct and analytical as ever. So really good place to start. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Olivia. Olivia, I have no idea what your job title is, so could you please use that or not, as the case may be, as you see fit. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. So hello everybody, my name's Olivia Butterworth. I am Deputy Director for People and Communities at NHS England and NHS Improvement, and my job title has changed a few times over the years, but my remit never has. So I've been in the same job, and my job is about involving people and communities. The NHS has statutory duties to involve people, often delivered in very tokenistic, episodic, consultative ways. where we go out about the things we've already decided and we ask people what they think, and if they tell us anything we didn't really want to hear because it doesn't chime with what we've already decided, we're probably just going to justify saying, well, you know, that's okay, that's over there, but we're going to do this because it's shiny and great and we're really clever and this is the right thing to do. So why am I here? I'm here because the NHS has duties to involve people in communities. I don't see in mainstream involvement people with addictions particularly. I think they fall into the bucket of people that the NHS likes to call hard to reach. Well, they're not bloody hard to reach, are they? They're really bloody easy to reach if you know where they are and you know how to work in a way that is respectful and build trust, and you know the people that people trust. So you work with colleagues. So April and I do a lot of work together. I wouldn't have been able to involve various different people and groups without April's support, because actually she's enabled some of those things, and we've worked together in a way that we've adapted the way in which we involve people to make sure that it is safe, that it is trauma informed, and that it's impactful, so that people can see why they're getting involved. So I'm here because what we saw through COVID was a bit of a melting away of organisational barriers, people coming together to do the right thing, regardless of the organisation that they worked for. And then we sort of saw a retrenchment of those organisational barriers, and we saw the lack of bureaucracy return to the bureaucracy coming back of oh well, we can't do this because, and this isn't our remit, these people belong to them. Well, people are people, nobody belongs to anybody. And I think one of my reflections is organisations can become, and this is true across the board, the NHS, local government, the voluntary sector, the NHS, organisations are very paternalistic about people. They're our people, and we keep them in that box. So people with addictions might have used their voice and their experience within addiction services. But why aren't they in primary care? Why aren't they in the personalisation conversations? Why aren't they in the hospital discharge conversations? Well, all too often it's because our organisations are keeping them in that kind of, actually, you're ours, and we'll involve you where we see fit to involve you. And organisations operate in their sector silos. So how many of you are really involved in primary care networks and the development of primary care networks? How many of you are really involved alongside NHS partners in the hospital discharge programme? And you might not have been let in. You might not know it's happening. You might not have the resources to. And all of that we need to start to address, because people are people, and we need to start thinking about people as whole people, not their addiction or their illness or whatever else. And they have something to contribute. And, you know, if you've got an addiction, primary care is still really important to you. It's not just your addiction services and support. So how do we do that? And I think there is something about how we as professionals, or as people with lived experience already engaged, act as facilitators, as door openers, rather than gatekeepers and barriers. And I think all too often it's safer to be a bit of a gatekeeper, rather than actually, no, come, let's have this conversation. So really seeing the whole person and their potential, and thinking about how we get people out of their silos. We see a lot of people looking at recruiting people with lived experience within the sector with which they have that experience. So we recruit people who've had addictions to work in addiction and recovery services. We recruit people who've experienced of mental health services to work in mental health services, and so on. Why? Because actually people's values and their skills are relevant to all health and care careers. So how are we really supporting people in recovery journeys to think about whether or not they could go into nursing, whether they could go into other allied health professional roles, and how do we really unlock and untap people's ambitions? And I don't think we do enough of that. I think we're very good, certainly, you know, there's lots and lots of projects across the homeless sector of getting people back into work, and they train to go and work at Costa Coffee. Well, we've got a project about training people to become healthcare support workers. because actually it's their skills, it's their experience, it's their lives that we need, their values that we need in nursing and in those nursing careers. So there's something for all of us about, let's just step outside of our own silos and really see the art of the possible. And most importantly, start by what matters to people without us limiting their expectations. Because I think we do put limitations on people unintentionally, but we limit them. And how do we do some of this? The leadership is blooming critical. So we're hearing a lot at the moment about integrated care systems, integrated care boards, there's an NHS bill going through, and so on. Doesn't really matter what the structure is, it's the culture that matters, and it's the way in which people work. So my role is in engagement, it's in involving people in communities, but that does not mean that it's my job to do that involvement. My job is to facilitate the decision makers, the people who hold power, the people who control things, to sit alongside and to really deeply listen and work with people around what really matters, to genuinely involve. I can't do that because I'm not making decisions about primary care commissioning or what mental health services are commissioned. I need to facilitate those commissioners to be in those spaces. So how do we create those spaces where, and the imperative for leaders to get out of their board meetings and into communities to be and to listen and to really think about the human relationships that we need, and how you do that in a way that builds trust. Because until those people are there, until they feel it, until they really feel it, we won't get any difference. We won't get any change, because it's just a paper exercise. And this needs to be felt. So I suppose my call to action for you is, how aspirational are you for the people that you work with? How often do you have those conversations with people? And how much do you talk to the senior leaders? How can you open up your spaces for people to be and to just sit and experience, not to do or come with an agenda, but just to experience?
Fantastic. Thank you, Olivia. Again, a really powerful and kind of stirring, overview of this topic, and a nice point to end on there. Thank you. Okay, next up, we've got Jed. Over to you. And if you could introduce yourself, please, Jed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jed Pickersgill. My telephone's ringing. That's perfect. Opportune moment. It's the hottest phone in the northwest of England. I used to carry 2 at one point. I'm Jed Pickersgill. I'm the business development lead for the Well Communities CIC. We're a third sector organisation based in the north of England. Why am I here? Do you know what? I'm here because around 2010, I was working for the Statutory Drug Service, and they rolled me out as a national service user rep like Roger de Courcy. You know, for those of us who are old enough to remember Roger de Courcy, where he put his hand up Nucky's back, and Nucky said exactly what he wanted to say on stage in London. And then it was all well and good, you know, from being street homeless and drinking gallons of whiskey at 7 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, I'm sat in London surrounded by really important people getting fed Black Forest Gatto. So I'm quite happy at that point to kind of conform to whatever I was told, you know, and I'm more than happy to do that. Absolutely. Lived experience, you know, I've got some pretty funky lived experience. You know, I know my way around a few bins down in Camden Town. Go and talk to my sister about lived experience, whose mother asked her on a deathbed to look after her brother because he's going to use himself to death. There's some lived experience. We and I, you know, it's tokenistic. Sometimes I feel it can be tokenistic. I feel that sometimes on occasion we can bring lived experience into certain organizations and say, you know, let's hear what you've got to say, and then we'll co-produce with you. No, you won't. You just want to get basically a number of individuals, service user of services. You just want to get a number of our individuals who we work with to consult and then say, we have done this consultation and the survey says, yeah, fully aware. The computer says no model, you know, the computer says no. Let's use loads of lived experience people from the third sector because they're really cheap. No, we're not. We're qualified by experience. We're professionals of lived experience. We're extremely skilled and capable at the work we do. My experience of it is lived experience. A lot of people, a lot of individuals, you know, I wish I had 50 quid for every time somebody had rolled out the cycler chains to me, because I wouldn't be driving a Transit minibus. I'd be driving a Bugatti Veyron. We've heard it all before. I've heard it all before. The same old, you know, same thing. Let's just rebrand it. Let's call it something else. We called it Building Skills for Recovery this year, you know, and then I'll walk in at my most broken. Someone will tell me to come back in 3 weeks' time and fill a 30-page document in. And then they'll say, you must jump through these hoops. Our computer says no. Whereas when we have individuals with lived experience in the treatment system who've been there, done that one, got the T-shirt, we tend to obtain some trust. People don't trust. You know, this might be a surprise to some individuals on this call today. My experience of services is we have a large lanyard that sometimes gets us 15% off at Domino's. But as soon as we walk through the door, wow, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. We don't trust the lanyard. People on the ground level who really need support from our organisations, they don't trust the lanyard. They just don't. You know, and then they'll walk into somebody with lived experience and it's a meet and greet, and it's not saying give us 30 pages of documents while we're staring at the clock, while we're filling it in. Would you like a coffee? How are you? How do we, as lived experience organisations, speaking from our point of view, who are of service to services, and again, in inverted commas, how do we capture, how do you quantify, put a KPI in a relationship? Put a KPI in a relationship with somebody's mother, brother, father, who think that their son's going to die, and they're extremely frustrated at trying to get into our world. We are not. People who lived experience. We are not the poor relation. We aren't. I completely agree with the point that that was made earlier. You know, not everybody. I think we've had somewhere around 370 residents in the last 3 years. You know, not everybody wants, can be, or even needs to be in the substance misuse field. You know, my experience of this stuff is it's increasingly more difficult working in the field because everybody's really needy. People come, you know, people come to us. They're looking for the S on the T-shirt, like Superman, like there's going to be some type of reparation process. There you go, we'll go to them. They've got an S on the T-shirt and they'll repair me, they'll fix me, just get the magic lamp out. Whoa, there you go. Yeah, you'll never use drugs again. You'll never be street homeless again. You'll be able to budget, brush your teeth. You know, what could the system do better? Listen to us. Listen, just listen. Give us a bit of time a day. Believe us. Commission without KPIs. What? How dare you mention that? Commission without KPIs? Radical thinking. Apologies for my passion.
No apology necessary, Jed. It's great to see, and it's, you know, why we wanted you to be part of the day today. So thank you. Really good. Fantastic. Over to our fourth speaker, and that is Niamh from Calderdale. Niamh, over to you. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Niamh Cullen. I work in Calderdale, which is a small local authority slap bang in the middle of the country between Leeds and Manchester. Place is really important to me. That's why I stress it. I'm a public health manager, but I have got the commissioning of drug and alcohol services in my brief, so also known as commissioner. And what brought me here, what interested me, I was reflecting on the question of how you support the lived experience to flourish in the system. And I thought about when I started work, and I've seen a couple of names in the chat. When I started work 30 years in the drug and alcohol field, it was really hard to get a job if you didn't have lived experience. All our managers had lived experience. And I'm not quite sure, I'm trying to fathom how we've kind of shifted to this, as Olivia said, paternalistic view now of sort of service user involvement and experts. They've always been there. And I think everything that's been said before about choice, around people in recovery not being a homogenous group, about there being a whole range of skills, and assets and aspirations there is really important. I don't see us as a drug and alcohol system here. I see us as a community in Calderdale. We've got a really thriving recovery community. I'm so blessed it's been going probably 10, 12 years now. I sit in meetings and it doesn't matter who has lived experience. There's people from all kinds of places, all kinds of levels of seniority, and you have to kind of check yourself to see who's going to wear the badge that day for a box ticking exercise if it's required. But what really interested with me about speaking this evening, was something about raising an amber flag on the risk of recovery capitalism. It really bothers me. It bothers me that I've seen big systems growing workers that then get paid less than everybody else, often aren't supported. I've seen many, many lapses. I've seen drug services shooting their own time after time. And I think it's really important that people have choice. There's a whole range, and that's not just, Olivia, within health services. You know, we've got butchers, we've got bakers, we've got lawyers, we've got all kinds of people in our community that people can reach out to work with. And I don't think I think listening is what's really important, and that's listening to people who are currently in treatment, who are working in treatment, that might have or might not have lived experience, that are in the co-op where their son's having a bad time. You know, there's something about it being really important that we listen and engage with everybody. And then where we do employ people that have come through our system, we're beginning to learn about how to support that and keep people safe in really stressful jobs where they're probably still vulnerable. We found that those that we've employed that have stayed within our recovery service with health and well-being recovery plans alongside supervision have fared really well. And that hasn't worked when we've seen people go to other organisations that don't have those things in place. So something that we do locally is, if you're in recovery and you've come through the system, wherever you work, you'll still have that connection and you can still have that regular support and well-being supervision. In that, there was something else. Oh, there was something else as well about having witnessed a recovery community and that lived experience grow from bottom up in the place. I really worry, and I think I'm talking to Jed a little bit here on this. I really worry that lived experience is a commodity that people think can be lifted and shifted, particularly in our mad world of contracting. It feels like it's suddenly got a value, and that feels really uncomfortable to me. So I really understand how organisations that have managed to create and develop their communities can advise other areas. But I do worry that we can't buy it. And I think there's something about really understanding it's not something for sale for me. And that's my bit.
Thank you, Niamh. Brilliant, and really good to get the commissioning perspective on that and stressing place as well. So thank you. Excellent. And then over to our final speaker of this session, Mark. Yeah, if you could introduce yourself to kick off, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm Mark Pryke, National Service User Involvement Lead for Change Grow Live. And I'm going to do a minimalistic approach, Oliver, given the time that we're on. And I think I agree with most and probably 90% of everything that everybody said so far. Obviously, I'm in a good position because I'm last to say that. Thank you. So what interested me about coming here today, I'm a person of lived experience of support in treatment systems. I also worked in the system for many years. I think when the experience of individuals is contextualized accurately, it has the power to initiate, influence, and continuously develop multiple systems. What's the one vision? I think they need to come together. It's been said before, we need to influence the system that impact on us as the people and the people that we care about. The one thing that our system could be better at, I think recognizing diversity of thought, experience, and the right to make informed choices. Who we are and what we do influences others' perception of us, and there's a responsibility to that. It's about integrity. There are different types of lived experience, all have equal value. There should be no judgment value between them. We need to respect individual choices. The system should recognize that one person's lived experience might not represent another's. And that's all I really want to say on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, very succinct, but a nice look back at the other 4 presenters as well. So thank you. Okay, brilliant. Well, that was a sort of power half hour of different perspectives. I feel like my brain's still kind of processing some of this stuff. I have jotted some of this stuff down. If you're watching and listening, please keep the questions flowing in. We've got some really good ones so far. I'm going to use Chair's prerogative and ask the first question, actually. And I think, it's such a kind of a big question in a way. Everyone's welcome to speak on it if they so wish. And my question is about power. We all inhabit systems, multiple different systems at any one time, usually overlapping, complex. We all have different roles. We've got kind of personas. We have different types of capital attached to us and status and stuff like that. And consequently, we all have different levels of power. And it works in both positive and negative ways, of course. So I guess my question is, given what we know about how power works, and it often locks lots of people out of power structures, given that we know people who use drugs and alcohol are likely to be in those groups of people who are locked out of power structures, how can we work with, and power's not always a bad thing, how can we work positively with power in the good ways, and how can we work against power when it's doing bad things to enable this this agenda to flourish? So enable that work with people with lived experience, both in the kind of service user side, but also in that, people with lived experience as leaders running recovery communities, the whole piece. How do we manage power? Just seems like such a big kind of overarching thing. I don't know if anyone's sort of quite a tricky question, maybe. Don't know if anyone Olivia, you were kind of nodding as if you agreed. So would you feel comfortable kicking us off?
Yeah, I think it's the right question to be asking, Oliver. And I don't think we talk enough about power. I think we used to. When I look back to, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I won't mention how many years, but a few decades ago, we used to be really active in thinking about power and how power impacts relationships and so on. And I think we've got really lazy in that, to be honest. And I hear an awful lot of, oh, we need to give power away. Well, what a load of nonsense. You can't give power away. You can use your power to share, to enable, to lift other people up. But you can't just step back from the power that you have because of the job that you do. That's the power that you have, and you have to acknowledge it. And it shouldn't be a dirty word. It's what you do with it. And I think there's something about modeling what we want to see in the world. So, I spend an awful lot of time talking to, convincing senior colleagues across NHS England about who should be in the room. And I know I can see Jeff's on the call. Jeff has been amazing to work with. And he's come into spaces with Ruth May, Chief Nurse of England, with Bola Oluwabi, who's the National Director for Health Inequalities, and really challenged them in a really positive way. But he's held truth to power, and I think there's that, we have to create spaces where people can speak their truth to those who hold power, and we have to support those people who have that power to hear that truth, and then to work with those people about how we then work moving forwards. I also think in the NHS, and my background's the voluntary sector, so I'm used to working as a bit of a maverick, and if we see something that needs to be done, somebody just cracks on and does it. In the NHS, everybody sits and waits to be told, waits for a guideline, waits to be, an instruction to do it, because unless they wait for somebody to tell them to do it, they're fearful of punishment, they're fearful of being told off. So something about how do we support our NHS colleagues, and I think it is in particular NHS, less so in local government, and I think voluntary sector people are just amazing. How do we support NHS colleagues to actually recognise the power that they do hold and what they can do, instead of being passive and sitting back and waiting to be told what to do? And I think that was what we saw in COVID, people actually owning their own power, owning their own agency, recognising somebody needed to do something, standing up and doing it. And that's where I think people have now retrenched back to, can't do that because it's outside my remit, or I might get told off, or I haven't been told, there isn't a guideline, there isn't a standard operating protocol, I'll wait. Well, actually, we're back in that space now because we're about to go back to a level 4 incident for the NHS. Unless we take action now around vaccines, we're going to be in lockdown again next year. You know, now is another wave. Now is the start of another really tough period. And now is the time to really think about those power dynamics and how we use the power that we do have in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Olivia. Mark, how have you found advancing this cause within quite a large organisation?
It can be tricky. I think the old definition of power is personal. I think there's a perception that often people are given an opportunity to change things, but sometimes that doesn't pan out. So I just wonder sometimes if it's worth flipping on its head. As a person with lived experience, is that my power is to negotiate what you're about to say, and my power is to decide whether I participate or collaborate with you. And I think that changes some of the dynamics. I think often what I've seen, not just in the organisation I work for, generally speaking, is that there is good intent. However, it doesn't pan out to some sort of meaningful action or outcome for the person that's been involved, you know, and that can be quite demotivating. However, you know, you've got likes of the Well, people that have built stuff ground up, that have taken their own power and formed their own place. Sorry, the door's going.
Don't worry.
Dog's going. But I think she'll calm down in a sec. It really is about that collaboration, about that discussion, about what it means for different people and what the potential is, and holding each other to account all the way through.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. I'll have a word with the delivery guy after.
No worries at all. The perils of doing everything from home. Do other panelists want to come in on this question? Niamh?
I was thinking from a commissioning point of view. I've been really conscious around how you structure that power in, particularly if you're a lived experience organisation, who often have looked like the small, poor relation, getting a little bit of the contract and, you know, struggling to have their say. So we've done a few things in our commissioning open alliance model, so that the LERO are as completely equal partners, even though they're technically subcontracted. In terms of our relationship and the contract monitoring meetings and everything, they are ever present and their voice is equal. But we've also had a coup where what we've now done is we've moved our treatment service, the bigger, wealthier provider, into our recovery service. So they're now the landlords, which is brilliant. So looking for ways in which you can restructure some of those powers really help.
I suppose from a power perspective, speaking of the P word, you know, all these multi-million pounds being thrown at treatment services, we've been delivering it out to church halls, out of hours, with a load of PG tips and a load of willing individuals since 1935, you know, with dramatic results from what I see. So when we're speaking of some type of power imbalance, yeah, we've got 4,661, just one fellowship, by the way, 4,661 Great Britain meetings kicking around out of service hours, you know, because people don't stop taking drugs and drinking at 5 o'clock, which may be a shock to some individuals. Out of service hours, thousands and thousands of people just sitting in a freezing cold church hall. God forbid we have the power to help each other. There's your lived experience in a nutshell.
Thank you, Jed. And April, on this point, did you want to come in before we move to other questions?
I think the thing with power is we have to acknowledge it. For me, So people talk about you've got equal say. No, I haven't. It's not my budget. No, I haven't got equal power. It's not me that's signing on the dotting line to say this is clinically safe. I can have a say, and I can. It's about honesty. It's about saying where the power lies and where the limits of what you can achieve right here, right now lie, I think. And anyone that tries to tell you you have equal power is almost certainly lying to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, really, really important point. Some good contributions. I'm just going to read a kind of counterpoint from the chat box from David. He said, "This feels like an odd conversation to me, as any other service or business starts with the customer, builds its offering around them, not this is the offer, do you fit the box? The answer is simple. Talk to people about what's right and wrong and what could be improved, then act upon it. Let's not overthink it. Listen and build on what people want." So yeah, I like that. That's a good counterpoint to what we've discussed. Okay, we've got a question from Richard. How do we best support people with lived experience moving from voluntary roles to paid employment in substance misuse services? And there's also a question from Laura, who says, as an ex-service user, I'm interested in working in services. It seems I'm expected to do a large amount of voluntary work before I could be considered to deserve, in quote marks, paid work. How is this fair? How can we change it? So I know that people said at the beginning, it's not just about building pathways for people to gain employment within treatment services, but, you know, sort of starting there. Who would like to come in on this? I mean, Niamh, perhaps would you kick us off, just because you've obviously spoken about this interface a bit?
I mean, the first thing I think about there is, yeah, if people want to, but then there's that whole thing about having the right attributes and not assuming just because you're in recovery that you're suddenly going to be a great drugs worker. You know, life doesn't work like that, does it? There's a different set of skills and attributes that you have to gather experience in. So I think volunteering is really key. I think volunteering, what we do is volunteering in a variety of placements, so not just in the drug and alcohol service, so getting a broader feel about what's out there. And training is really important as well. And I think that, yeah, those are the things. And then again, if somebody wants to apply for a post, then they would like anybody, wouldn't they? I just think rather than I really worry about this sort of sausage meat machine of producing a slightly cheaper worker that we call them a recovery builder next week they're a key worker. I don't know, I've seen too many casualties along the way on that. So I think yeah, we've all had to, you know, whether you've got lived experience or not, you're not going to walk into an outreach worker job without having had some, if not paid experience, are you?
Yeah, thank you, Niamh. Others want to come in on this? Jed?
I think the difficulty is the level between kind of ground level worker and the management. That transition is the difficult process for me. It's actually upskilling individuals to go into kind of the next level up kind of thing. We as a lived experience organisation have got a real strong track record of bringing people into the organisation who want to be in it. But again, it's all about a real multi-thematic delivery approach whereby, you know, we have someone overseeing electronic platforms, we have someone, we don't want to put too much stress on people early doors. You know, if someone's, and again, you know, more often than not, we will bring people through on a really phased approach. So a period of volunteering, maybe offer some part-time work, just settling in, learning the trade, just getting involved, going meeting partners, all that kind of stuff. And it's about really nurturing people and making sure that the recovery is really solid before we start appropriate, you know, giving them loads of stress. We've got a young man here who I think 18 months ago, he was sleeping in a train station drinking pink gin. And today he is doing a third sector leadership degree. And it's around trying to get that, you know, the future of the organisation it is built on us. It really is. But as a lived experience organisation, it's purely built on us. So it's really important that we look after people and make sure they've got that kind of recovery capital behind them to sustain the recovery while they're working. That's the importance.
Absolutely. Olivia, could I ask you, you know, in our field, we've got there's almost this sort of assumption that people come into treatment and recovery services, and then there's a certain degree percentage of people who kind of volunteer around the service, and then there's a certain percentage of people who think, oh, I want to be a drug and alcohol worker, and there's this sort of natural pathway. Is this something that you see mirrored in kind of other domains? Because obviously you've got that broader perspective and a sort of a mainstream health perspective, or are we, as is often the case, a bit of an outlier on this?
No, I don't think you are a bit of an outlier. And I think that there is something, if I look at the homelessness sector, if I look at the drug and alcohol sector, if I look at the mental health sector, there is an awful lot of, actually, we go to where we know and where we feel safe, don't we? So if you've been through services, actually you want to make a contribution back, you want to improve the service, you want to use your experience to improve it, and so on. What I would do is I would really encourage people to, if you're in that place of looking for work, look outside the services that you've been accessing as well, and think more roundly, because there's a whole host of other services out there that are complementary too, and maybe weren't available to you, but should have been available to you. And I've posted 2 links in the chat. One's to the eLearning for Health website, which has oodles. It is the sort of the online accredited learning platform for anybody working in health and care, and the Royal Society of Public Health e-learning platform. And both of those, there's loads and loads of free, fully accessible courses that you can have a look at. You can dip your toe in. You don't really have to make a commitment, but you might sort of find something out. I'd also think, you know, it is, volunteering is brilliant. I got into the role I'm in now through a long time ago. I was volunteering, and I still hold my volunteering experience, and I still volunteer because it's one of the things that keeps me rooted. And there is a beauty about volunteering where you're not a paid employee, and actually it is quite different, and you learn an awful lot and you see an awful lot that you benefit from, but you can also think about improvement and change from a very different lens to a paid employee. So I think there's something about open up your mind to just thinking about the art of the possible and other things that might really excite you. So don't be limited just by the services that you've accessed. Maybe think about what would have been brilliant for you to access and what sets your heart on fire. Do something you love. And I do just want to pick up Jed's point about the fellowship and the peer-to-peer recovery groups. I'm only sharing this because it did actually amuse me immensely at the time. We were doing a session for NHS colleagues mainly about working with hard to reach groups, working with inclusion health populations and how to reach them. And one of the comments we got from a health professional in the chat was, well, this lived experience thing, I don't really understand it, because honestly, we wouldn't be asking alcoholics to support other alcoholics, would we? And it was a proper faceplant moment as I was chairing this webinar with several hundred people on it going, you're a GP and you've just said you wouldn't get alcoholics supporting other alcoholics. Where have you been for your entire life? So I think there's also something about people's level of understanding about peer support, about the power of peer support, and kind of how all of that really works. Don't assume people know, because they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Olivia. April, I'm going to come to you for the next one. We've got a question from Mark Gilman in the chat, a very experienced observer of our field. Mark, good to have you here today. Mark says, we've got extensive contact with people with lived experience of abstinence-based pathways. You know, how do we make sure that that contact is sort of equal or equitable across those different pathways? Because we know that that's one route, but it's certainly not the only route. So people who are, you know, out of treatment, people who are in receipt of OST, you know, people who are affected by other health exclusion issues. And I know, April, you've done you know, research with universities kind of looking at this, but also you've got quite a long lens of experience on this, sort of back to NTA days and so on. Thoughts on this one?
My first thought is, as a sector, we have to value the people who are on OST or who are still using as much as we value the people in recovery, because from where I'm sitting, there's a hierarchy. I'm quite a long way down it personally. I had an incident recently. I phoned up somebody who'd been to some workshops that I'd run, and I said, do you want to come to another workshop? I want to hear about your experiences accessing a GP. I'm not asking about drugs, it's about health. And she said, oh, but April, I can't because I've relapsed, because I'm using. So I've been told I can't go to user involvement groups. My answer probably isn't fit for public consumption, but until we change that attitude, until we say that actually this is about everybody and this is about all of the experiences, and we value the people for who they are, it's not going to change. Going through the years, the number of people involved in user involvement, sitting on committees, all that sort of thing, who are on OST has gone down and down.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my
okay. Thank you, April. And Mark, for you, how's Change, Grow, Live, you know, grappled with this kind of diversity? Because we all know there's so many different paths through this stuff. How's that sort of worked out for you as the national lead?
So I'm just going to use my power, Oliver, to say I prefer to answer from my perspective,
of course,
rather on behalf of the organisation I work for, and they do sometimes dovetail, sometimes not. But I think it's interesting what April said, because I think when we're talking about healthcare and we're talking about equity, I mean, I'm a keen mountain biker. Every time I fall off my bike, I go to the hospital. They treat what's wrong with me, but I don't ever get asked, or it doesn't get brought up in my records to say, oh, you've been here before and you've had this medication before. It's a very non-judgmental approach for my daily activities in terms of healthcare. It's, you know, it has changed and it probably has improved in some areas, and maybe not in other areas, but there is still a tangible prejudice around people who want to come in and out of a system that's been built for them, when obviously it isn't meeting their needs. And that still exists today. And, you know, cultures and myths, some are more poignant and powerful than others, and they change like the mist of time. But I think, you know, it's about equity, Oliver. And I think that if we are moving towards a health agenda, that equity should be apparent to those people that may want to choose to have a drink and not be abstinent, and may want to use now and again because, you know what, it alleviates their stress or anxiety. But yeah, so it's about people's choices and us adjusting to that and respecting that. But it can be quite challenging. And you know, I think this is about, we've worked and breathed in a system that generalizes, that likes to put tags on people and stuff like that, and people get overlooked in it, and people's choices get overlooked in it. And it is about individualization.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on this, or we can move? Yeah, Niamh.
I do worry, and it's been interesting with the drug strategy being rolled out, and we've got the commissioners group now, and we've got collective voice, and we've got the LEROs, but we do not have an in-treatment voice to engage with. And I think it is very telling, and it's the risk, isn't it, around that shift into recovery, which was obviously great, but you know, locally we're able to do that now because harm reduction's back on, outreach is back on, and we're engaging. But there is some work to do nationally on how we get those voices embedded, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Niamh. Anyone else? No. We'll go to our next question. So we've got a question from Sohan. This is a good time to ask this question because Sohan and I were both on a call earlier today looking at the commissioning standards which are being developed as part of the government's response to the Dame Carol Black review and also the drug strategy of last week. So Sohan's asked a question about how we can do better at engaging the lived experiences of ethnic minority populations and the issues being faced by those communities accessing drug treatment. So really, really important topic. Who would like to take this one? Niamh, do you want to ask you up? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's dreadful. We're not going to be able to get a lived experience voice until we change the uptake in treatment. And I know where I am, it's dreadful. We've had, again, you know, we started to try and do stuff before COVID. That's all died a death, but there's a real need to reach out and understand what that lack of engagement is. And I don't believe it's because of need. So yeah, so I think so we're nowhere near having that voice, and I've seen Sohan speak at several places, and he currently is being that voice. But it's a huge issue, and hopefully then will be addressed through commissioning standards. That would be good. Again, you know, all of this stuff hasn't not been done before. We need to remember what we've forgotten as well. But yeah, it's really important.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what we're really talking about is trusting a system that might not offer any. You know, yeah. I think there is a perception that, you know, well, why should I bother? Or the other part of it, going back to April's point at the beginning, you have a positive or negative experience, and it's that having the door shut in your face, it just doesn't start. You don't understand the word I'm saying. So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's not just drug and alcohol services. I've been in a meeting this morning looking at domestic abuse. I mean, it's this universal parallel communities, and there's work we've got to do that's beyond the subject issues, I think, on that inclusion.
Olivia, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I think this really speaks to how we need to start where people are. So if we don't have people from different ethnic minority communities coming forward into services need to go where they are. And so, you know, if you are Muslim, you are likely to be in contact with your mosque. What conversations are we having with the imams about access to services and treatment? You know, and we've seen a lot of this with different health conditions. So I know 3 of the different local mosques close to where I live are all really actively involved in different aspects of trying to reach out to their populations, their communities, to send out different messages about access to services and support. But if services aren't culturally competent, people aren't going to access them. If nobody in that room looks like you, how uncomfortable is it to go into that space? So do we really need to properly rethink and start by what we say we should be doing in general, and really step into people's communities, people's spaces, sit with them and work out what's going to work for them? Because to do it from a white middle class perspective, whether you've been a user or not, isn't really going to cut it, because you simply will not understand all of the other factors that are impacting on people's lives.
Thank you.
And sorry, Sohan, I've got the blog open on my other screen. So yes, I'm not going to read it now because that would be very distracting, but thank you for sharing the link.
Cheers. April, I know you did the research with Bradford University. How did race feature in that when you were looking at kind of overlapping experiences?
We looked at people from marginalised communities generally, didn't we, Olivia, last summer? And we conducted one-to-one telephone interviews asking community opinion. We did it in 13 languages. We used community members who spoke another language and could interact with the computer system to conduct the interviews, and got some really interesting stuff about all different sorts of things. And when we did a piece of work more recently about stigma and drug use, race came out as one of the things that impacted there. And one of our 2 of our case studies were people talking about race and the impact it had on them. So I don't know that it's hard to get the voices of lived experience. What's difficult is to get the services to meet the needs of those voices. So that's sort of my comment, is I think people from those communities are more than happy to talk to us. It's just we need to put the effort in a bit.
Yeah. Thanks, April. Who's not coming on this? Jed, did you want to speak on this one? We could go to next question. Okay. There's a question in the chat from Richard. So he's asking about co-production in service delivery, i.e. shared decision-making in what and how a service is delivered. We know that co-production's become the sort of buzzword of the last, I don't know, 5 years, is it? And, you know, rightly so in some ways, but there's always a risk with buzzwords that they sort of displace the other key ideas and words, and people sort of latch onto them and say, oh, we're doing co-production over here. So, you know, perhaps a question for everyone, but what's been your experience of trying to do genuine co-production, and what would be your one piece of advice for people who are trying to do it? You know, in other words, how can we do it well? Who wants to start? Jed, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So this whole organization is built on co-production and asset-based community development. I hear it all the time. The great buzzwords: we are asset-based community developers. We are co-producing. We are all quality adjusted light years. You know, all the different buzzwords that floating around and they change around. Bottom up, organic, grassroots, peer-led recovery has to be co-produced. It has to be. There's no other way. It just wouldn't happen. It would not even be possible without co-production. Co-production looks like, I once had a conversation with a probation officer around a guy who was a mapper, I think a mapper 2, and he's a beautiful human being. I said, you see him for 1 hour a week, we've got him for 156. That's co-production. Co-production is actually listening to what people are saying and shaping the service around need. You know, I am yet to see anyone come to our door and say, I have a crack cocaine problem, Gerald. I don't have any other issues. Just everything in the planet is fantastic. I'm smoking an occasional bit of crack, you know? Yeah, everybody has got multiple different things going on that literally, as fast as they're coming in, you've got to react to them and you've got to shape your service around individuals, or alternatively, short of the Cape, again, co-production has to involve a real strong asset map of other local services, and we'll co-produce with them and the individual who needs that support. I once, it's like the old partnership. Oh, partnership. Partnership doesn't look like both signing a funding bid and then merging 2 spreadsheets at the back end of it and giving each other a tokenistic round of applause. Oh, well done, well done. Partnership working looks like genuine co-production of 2 organizations, bringing the cultures together, bringing the clients together, bringing the thinking together and the learning. And a lot of it, particularly around co-production, is not having a fear of saying, maybe that bit's not worked. You know, that's the beauty of co-production. You know, sometimes it's like, we're 6 weeks down the line and it's like, this feels quite uncomfortable. Do you know what? It isn't working. Let's change it quickly. How do we change it? Let's talk to the people who we're working with. Let's talk to them. What isn't working? Sometimes we've got to know off the individuals what's not working. You know, we can all sit here and pat ourselves on the back. Oh, well done, you're doing really well. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, we're not. You know, we need to have those uncomfortable, be prepared, you know. And I think, to be honest with you, I could be wrong, but I think the voluntary sector or our sector is very good at kind of taking those conversations on the chin and thinking, maybe we need to look at that, you know. But co-production, it can't be just a buzzword; it's an action.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mark, could we come to you next on this one?
Sure. I think people have different versions of co-production, and I think it's often worth starting there. I think working in quite a large organization, what we sometimes experience are requests for co-production, and then you look at the timescales, you look at are there any willing participants, and then you get the sense that this is just a very tokenistic approach to something that somebody else has heard about that's the right thing to do. I think from my position, I accept that on an individual basis, some people don't want to be too involved. Some people just want to come and do a survey, or they just want to press a button to leave their feedback as they go back out the door, or whatever it is. And that's it. It's on an individual basis. Personally, we've got lots of different examples of where co-productions work, and in the truest sense, and when you look at it, the things that facilitate co-production are time, trust, relationships, all those kind of things. And often that rubs with the performance culture of services. And getting the sweet spot in between that is a gift, in my opinion. You know, it's organic, it blossoms, and there you go. It's beautiful. But in terms of that buzzword thing, I agree with everything that, you know, we should be careful. And there is a tendency in the field to stop using one language, start using another language because it's trendy. And actually, everything's got a value. And I think that's sometimes the rabbit hole that we end up going down.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. April, for you, how does co-production slot in alongside other methods of working together?
It's one tool of many, as far as I'm concerned. I'm also going to say that everybody I speak to about co-production means something slightly different. So I'm not 100% sure what we mean by co-production, and I've been around quite a long time. There's a time and a place for a well-meaning, for a well-designed, properly used survey where people can just click the button, like Mark said. There's a time and a place for holding workshops and somebody writes it up. There's time and a place for consulting, and all of these tools. And we need to be, I think the thing that upsets me most about co-production is being told something is co-production when it blatantly isn't. So there needs to be an honesty about what we're doing here and now and why. And if the answer is, you're going to fill in this survey and I may or may not listen to the results, then I can choose whether to fill in that survey or not. But if you tell me, click this button and it's going to be co-production, and it isn't, I'm going to walk away feeling really betrayed by it, and we are destroying trust. And Mark's thing about the buzz phrase, it's the buzz phrase. Everyone's doing co-production and I'm rarely seeing it. All right, that's my rant over. There we go.
Can I jump in off the back of that? I mean, April, I can't believe you don't think that you co-produced that survey that you responded to last week. I mean, honestly, I bloody hate the word. I absolutely detest the word. It's like the semantic debates between involvement and engagement and participation. Quite frankly, I don't give a damn. I want to know if you're working in partnership with people. Are you actually working together? Don't call it co-production, because it's just another word that excludes people. You know, in the NHS, we talk about patient and public involvement, and it gets shortened to PPI. And then people say that the hard to reach people won't come to their PPI group. Well, of course, they're not going to come to your bloody PPI group. They think it's about missold insurance. You know, we use language to exclude people because it holds power. And unless you understand the jargon, then you're not going to fit. So cut the crap Stop trying to make yourself look better than everybody else by using loads of bloody fancy words. And I'm sorry for swearing, but quite frankly, this really gets my goat, because we will not involve people. We will not change the way we work. We will not do anything differently if we all get tied up in stupid debates about bloody language. But don't call something that it's not, and just tell the truth. Because if you tell the truth about what the sphere of influence is, about what the scope is of what it is you're trying to do, you will only get people's respect and buy-in. You know, to say apples is apples and oranges is oranges. Don't try and pretend that apple's an orange, because it ain't, and people see it.
Thank you. April, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think the other thing about
Rant over.
co-production is that it takes loads of time and loads of energy and loads of commitment. And you talk to people that are on co-production groups and they meet for 4 hours a week every week and all this sort of stuff. You know what? I've got better things to do with my life. Ask me what I think about something and I'll tell you. Ask me if I want to be involved in a specific project, and I may or may not do it. But by putting everything as being co-production or nothing, we are excluding loads and loads and loads of people.
Just to add on to that, I've not finished my little rant. Sorry, April's heard this before. We totally exclude people, because in order to co-produce something, basically you've got to not have a job or be wealthy enough to not need a job, because everything happens between 9 and 5. They ain't meeting in the drafty church hall at 7 o'clock at night to co-produce their whatever strategy, because they've all gone home. Maybe if they were meeting in the drafty church hall at 7 o'clock at night, they might even have started to co-produce something. But we exclude people because of the demands we put on people's time. We don't really think, the comment in the chat earlier about really designing stuff around people, let's really think about the burden that we put on people, asking them to be involved in something that's probably never going to come to anything anyway. But we've called it something fancy, and we might produce a nice leaflet.
Yeah,
You do realise, Oliver, that Olivia and I could go on like this for hours.
It's good. It's, you know, you're sparking off each other, which is good. April, Olivia's comment reminded me of you know, a recent conversation we'd had about you set up your new project or your working group or whatever, and you kind of invite people along to it. And of course, if I get an invite like that, the only decision for me is, do I have the time to do this or not? Yay or nay. But of course, for some people, we're actually saying, can you give up these hours, days of your time for no money at all? Because, oh, by the way, we really value your expertise, and that might be genuine. You know, that invite really might value their expertise and be determined to do it in the right way. But actually, the ask of that person is, you know, you're basically going to volunteer and go and do this quite detailed or kind of tricky or sensitive bit of work, which of course I can just do within my working week. Which is a perfect segue, though I say myself, onto our next question, which is from Suzanne McGregor in the chat. Mark's contribution earlier seemed important in listing a number of core values. This made me wonder if there is, or perhaps should be, I'll expand the question, a code of ethics for involvement of people with lived experience in services or policy or research. Has this been developed anywhere? Really interesting question, actually. So kind of the ethics of working together, basically, the ethics of working with people with lived experience. Niamh, where would you start on this one?
I haven't got a list of ethics. I think that's really interesting, isn't it? But should we be siloing it? Should we have ethics around inclusion of whether you're a service user? Well, yeah, I guess I'm thinking on my feet here. Yeah, they would be, but they need to, that lived experience, I'm thinking, goes back to people that might be continuing to use substances and those, I mean, so it needs to be all inclusive. But I think there's not, I mean, reviewing our points of engagement, I mean, going back to what Mark said about this, for me, it's all about building trusting relationships. It's all about asking, it's all about listening to what comes back. And And, you know, co-production is a new wave, but the old-fashioned stuff for me is it's about building therapeutic alliances. And that kind of works with your partnerships as well. It's not just in terms of service user engagement. So, yeah, I mean, it would be something I could imagine take a long time to get something everyone would agree to.
Thank you, Niamh. Wow, the hands are popping up for this one. I think Mark got in there first.
I think there's something about the definition of ethics, and if you stay there, you'll be good. You'll be well placed. I think there's also something about there's a lot of stuff out there, right, about human rights and recognizing fully the person in front of you. And I think if you start there and you accept that there's some good guidance already, I just wonder, you know, I'm just.
Thanks, Mark. Can I just say, as a philosophy graduate, I love the fact that a collective voice webinar's got onto the topic of the definition of ethics. That's good. We got unexpectedly deep here today. I'm not sure who got in next. Olivia.
I'll try and be really brief. So I quite like the idea because I see involvement done so badly in so many situations, but I don't think it should be something that's unique to the drug and alcohol sector. I think there is something about a set of standards around recognising that involvement needs to be trauma informed, because we re-traumatise people repeatedly without giving them any access to support or counselling or therapeutic interventions or anything. So we have to think about the trauma informed nature and the psychologically informed nature of how we involve people. And there's a whole absolute Pandora's box around remuneration, reward, recognition, that there is not a level playing field, because if you're in the NHS, your budget is very different. If you're in the voluntary sector, people do things for different motivational reasons. It's not always about receiving a payment. Actually, some people want different things. Actually, people who tend to shout loudest for the payments are the white middle class retired folk, in my experience. And I think, you know, we need to really think about how we do that reward and recognition and what does it really mean. But I quite like the idea. But it has got to be a set of standards that is across everything, not sector specific.
Thanks, Olivia. April.
Okay, Olivia said quite a lot of what I wanted to say. I don't think we're at a point of saying doing this ethically. Let's just start by not doing it by damaging people. There's the re-traumatization. There's the fact that we're running on people's goodwill, and almost everybody I speak to sooner or later goes, hang on a minute, I'm being used. The rewards and recognition is a bit tricky, and we spend lots of time arguing about it. But Olivia's just given me a brilliant opening on the level playing field thing. Is we're not on a level playing field. Okay. I'm not even seeing the playing field most of the time. I'm at the bus stop up the road with a map that's 10 years out of date, waiting for a bus that will probably never turn up because somebody's taken the funding. Right. We're not even there yet as a sector. So level playing field's a bit optimistic, Olivia. We need to step back a bit.
Thank you. Jed.
So I'm aware that the CLEROs, which is a College of Lived Experience Recovery Organisations, which is led by some quite hundreds of nationwide lived experience organisations. Professor David Best is involved. Our Chief Exec, Dave Hyams, involves a lot of really articulate individuals from our sector, from the lived experience world, who are actually developing, as we speak, a set of standards. So what it feels like, what it looks like to be a lived experience recovery organisation, that's a piece of work that is an ongoing piece of work. It's not a quick. It is co-produced. There you go. I've used the buzzword. It is 100% co-produced, and as my My friend said it does take time to co-produce such a thing. And it's what it looks like, what it feels like, who we are, what we're about, what the morals, what the ethics, you know, what we're trying to achieve collectively together. But that is definitely being worked on as we speak.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jed. And yeah, good to get a plug in for that. What I know is an important piece of work. Okay, moving on to our next and possibly final question. There's a question here from an anonymous contributor. Do you think there's a way to get local authorities to not insist on sort of KPIs? I so far have only been successful in getting a minimal number in the contract, even in a co-design. My particularly successful approach has been, say, I don't know what the service will look like. It's down to those who use it to decide how it will work and develop. So I guess this point about, you know, we're dealing with people, we're dealing with complex issues, all human beings are complex. Can we sit in a room and say, oh, we'll do all these things, then these other things will definitely happen, and these numbers of people will definitely do that and meet these targets? I'd like to think we're moving in terms of commissioning and talking and thinking about public services to a point where we don't mutually author that fiction that everything moves in straight lines and everything moves in linear ways which we can predict. Actually, the world is a complex and adaptive system which is changing all the time. How can we build that into this? How can we build in flexibility around this agenda, whilst ultimately recognizing that, you know, often this is public money which is being spent on public services, and it is right that we ask the question, is this money being well spent? I mean, I don't think that's an unfair question to ask of anything really in this area. So it's kind of balancing this. Niamh, do you want to, it's a bit of a tricky one, but do you want to kick off as the commissioner?
Not really. So I started a new contract in 2015 with about 150 KPIs because I didn't trust them. And then you think about, as we developed our relationships over time, it's changed. And one of the really important things, if you stick to those KPIs rigidly, your service isn't fluid and doesn't develop and doesn't respond. And that service we needed in 2015 looks nothing like the service we've got and need today. And one of the absolute benefits of COVID was they stopped all the contract monitoring. So we didn't have those quarterly meetings. And I work very closely with our service. So it used to be really strange that every 3 months we'd sit in a room, be semi-formal and talk about things that we knew already. So we stopped all the contract monitoring. I think they're still keeping the data, probably because they've got the software just to press the button. But we don't, what we meet and that's our Lero and our treatment provider and myself, we meet for an hour a week. We have lunch together on a Thursday. We miss nothing. We know what's happening. And I'd like to think what comes next will be something along those lines with, and hopefully if we can shift from the market-driven tendering, we'll be looking at co-producing our outcomes and reviewing them really regularly. It just seems really sensible to me.
Thank you, Niamh. Who else wants to come in on this one? Jed?
No one's asking for a brown paper bag with used £5 notes with no accountability, you know, that can be delivered at the stroke of midnight in the back alleyway behind our building. But that isn't what anyone's looking for. My understanding is it was done in Salford. You know, it's quite radical, but the point that Niamh made there is absolutely on the money. On the money. You need to have, on the 20th of March 2020, when everybody was closing down. I'm talking not just services, I'm talking town halls, British Gas, water boards, everybody. And people are walking in our social supermarket downstairs with no shoes on, crying their eyes out. That, you've got to have the ability, yeah? You've got to have the ability to react and respond to market needs. When a dozen people died 150 yards away from where I'm sat right now in December 2019, you've got to have the flexibility to go and open a satellite hub over there quickly, populate it with people with lived experience and stop these people from dying. You know, you need that flexibility. So if it's completely rigid KPIs, yeah, which I understand the need for KPIs. Of course, we do work to them every single day of the week, you know, but you've got to have a certain element of fluidity. Maybe absolutely crazy idea is pay a retainer on the added value. Then also, is that a, you know, that's just come out of my that's just come from the bowels of my back of my brain. You look at all the added value. You know, we're very good at collecting all the added value stuff that this. We create community in our community, putting plants on trade station, food clubs. This is how you engage people. You've got to be a part of the community. I was in Halifax the other week, and I said exactly the service that Niamh refers to, and it was like walking in our building. It was just, it felt, the feeling I got when I walked into that project was exactly like walking into this building. It's not a service, this is a feeling. This is a feeling, you know, all the buzzwords, no wrong doors, blah, 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 this nonsense. Yeah. Literally, it's a feeling. It's a feeling of warmth, somebody caring, that kind of thing, you know. So radical commissioning, yeah, it would be, but there's got to be an element of trust in our sector. Absolutely. You know, a big element of trust in our sector that we're not just going to, you know, run off down the road in our 15-wheel transit minibus with a pocket full of hard-earned taxpayers' gas. We pay tax, you know, we pay tax. We're taxpayers. I pay water rates, gas bills, electricity bills. I pay for water, I pay council tax. I've got a TV license these days, you know. We're honest individuals, professional individuals, and very, very committed to the people we serve.
Yeah, thank you, Jed. Anyone else got a very quick thought on this one before I wrap up?
Just my one radical suggestion for commissioners would be to, wouldn't it be great if people set their own KPIs? So as an individual accessing a service, you know, what's the KPI that you would like? Where do you want to be? And actually have really drive person-centered commissioning.
Okay, thank you. I think on that note, we will call a close to this webinar. Thank you so much to the brilliant speakers. Lots and lots of stuff to chew through. Really, really interesting stuff. Sorry if we didn't get to your questions. There were some which went unanswered, but there was a lot of good ones. I haven't been monitoring the chat either because I've been paying attention to the questions. So sorry if I missed that. We've got a really exciting program of webinars to come next year. And some of the stuff we've discussed today, like race and power, we absolutely want to address in the next few webinars. So watch out for that and look forward to discussing with you as we go. And I was just going to finish by summing up. So this is me just reflecting the words of today back to you all. How do you put a KPI on a relationship? How do you see the whole person? How do you be human? How do you link, not gatekeep? Why do we do the work? Because leadership shapes culture, because we need to recognize diversity of thought, because language matters and race matters, because we're all skilled and competent. It's not a service, it's a feeling. This is about everybody. Place is important to us. Listening is also important to us. We're not a homogenous group. Some communities aren't being listened to. People must have choice. Lived experience can't be lifted and shifted. You can't give power away. It's what you do with it that counts. And do something you love. I hope that just reflected back some of the wisdom and thoughts I took from today. So that takes us to 5 o'clock. We are going to put brief kind of reflections and guidance that people have put in the chats. If you want to link a resource, a report, put it in there. If you want to big something up, put it in there, and we'll do our best to collate it and put that on our website. Take care of yourselves. It's nearly Christmas. Keep going. Everyone's knackered. But we need to all look after ourselves and each other. Thank you for being part of it today, and I look forward to catching up in the new year. Take care. Bye. Oh, and get vaccinated. Yeah, good. That's a good one.